We're going to Greece, and in particular, we'll be visiting the sacred site of Delphi, which is one of the most beautiful of all the classical remains in Greece. And on the lighter side, we'll also take you to some restaurants and some fine shops in the neighborhood of Delphi. It's a classical tour with extras. This is Dennis Cowan for the Hawaii Geographic Society, taking you to Greece. We're here today at the Temple of Delphi. This is one of the greatest sites of Greek classical antiquity. Dates back 2,500 years. There's a Temple of Apollo here, the Temple of the Oracle is here, and many beautiful features. There's a stadium, there's an amphitheater, there's ruins and columns all around us in this glorious setting at Delphi. In antiquity, Delphi was one of the most important religious centers of Greece. Here you see the stadium. This was built in 50 BC and it could hold 6,500 people. According to legend, Delphi was founded by Zeus, the head of all the gods. He determined that Delphi was the center of the earth, and this stone was the navel stone. At the planet's center, it became a worshiping place for the earth goddess Gaia. And as you walk through the site, you'll be astonished by the overwhelming beauty and the perfection of the vistas and the landscapes. The view from the top of the theater is perhaps the finest view that we experienced in our entire tour of Greece. The theater could hold 5,000 spectators with perfect acoustics. They came to hear legends about their god Apollo. Just down below is the Temple of Apollo. Delphi is most famous as the home of the Oracle. This was a priestess who would give somewhat ambiguous advice to the many pilgrims who flocked to Delphi from all over the Greek world. Delphi is a site not to be missed in your visit to Greece. Now, to give you some idea of where Delphi is located, here's the nation of Greece, and there's Delphi. It's about a 3-hour drive from the capital of Athens, so you could visit Delphi as a day trip from Athens, or better yet, you might spend the night as we're doing on this tour, and that gives you a full day in Delphi to enjoy the sights. While touring the spectacular ruins, we have the services of one of the best tour guides in all of Greece, our friend Poopy, who's been taking us around on a 4-day classical tour.
That there is the entrance, it's the beginning of the sacred way of the sanctuary. Here the sanctuary is an amphitheater. It's all those terraces going up to the root of the last steep rocks. So all that is man-made mostly terraces with retaining walls on which, like balconies, are the buildings. All this limited space along the cypresses, all that is the sanctuary. The heart of the sanctuary is the big temple there, the Temple of Apollo. That's where the oracle was. The temple that you see up there is 4th century BC. The best part about Delphi is the setting. This temple is not a Parthenon. It doesn't have that architectural perfection. It is not made of marble, which would be the ideal, and all that. But as a setting, it's the best place of all Greek sanctuaries. It is really awesome. It has the withdrawn and mystic, which is the character of an oracle. It had the right setting. It was accessible by land and sea, geographically well placed on central Greece so that they could come. It had the sacred signs, which was the waters and the fountains and the vapors. And this is the reason why they chose it, for all those reasons that I mentioned.
Now we've reached the Amphitheater at Delphi. This is smaller than the one that we saw at Amphitheater, but it's beautiful. It's perfect shape, semicircular structure with perfect acoustics. They didn't need amplifiers in ancient classical days. The orators and actors would stand right in the middle and everybody could hear perfectly, especially in a theater of this small human scale. And visual perfection, it's a stunning spot.
Now this theater does not compare with Epidaurus. It is only 1/3, it's 5,000 people. It has nothing of that fantastic acoustic or looks. You will notice that the orchestra has a little wall around because the Romans reshaped it for their needs later. And the rocks also destroyed it. But what a setting it had behind that stage. Look. That is where they had the spiritual contests, the rhapsodies, the hymns, the music.
There's also a stadium up the hill a little bit further, and we're going to see if we can climb that high. So let's climb up the hill.
It only takes about 10 minutes to walk up the gentle slope from the theater to the stadium, and it's well worth it because it's a very spectacular sight.
The sports contests were in the stadium. The stadium is smaller than the one of Olympia. It's 178 meters, the length of the running. There it was 192 meters. It is also smaller on the sides. It could seat 7,000 roughly. The Olympia could seat roughly 40,000. So 7,000 in the stadium, 5 in the theater. That gives us approximately the number of people that every 4 years came to celebrate here the Pythian Games in honor of Apollo. Now the buildings here are mostly made from the rock itself, which is the quarry. It's limestone, and you notice that the temple of Apollo has the same color as its background, because that background is the material. This curve around is called the crossroad of the treasuries. The treasury of the Athenians and all those treasuries, what they contained, remember I mentioned that these are not banks. That is, what you put in there is not necessarily of material value. It can well be, thank you for that victory, the souvenir of a great man. It could be of sentimental value. Now, the treasury of the Athenians originally was built after the Persian Wars, beginning 5th century BC. And the Athenians, if all the Greeks were restless, the Athenians were the most restless of all. They were exhausting the rest of the Greeks, and they were the most demanding of all Greeks. But they were especially demanding on themselves. They never accepted second rate. So here, all the buildings were made of the simple stone here. The Athenians brought their marble from Athens. It's 180 kilometers away. The best of Greek marbles, though. The Penteli marble, the same as the Parthenon. So that's the marble that was used for the treasury of the Athenians, as well as for the portico of the Athenians that you see there with the little columns, which were Ionic in style. This was Doric, that was Ionic. And next we have the portico of the Athenians. The portico of the Athenians had Ionic columns, the roof, and people sheltered underneath there could see it as the processions passed along the sacred way. And there were monuments all the way around here and some green. So this was like a presentation area. Now, what's more important about this portico of the Athenians is the background wall. This polygonal wall not only is so well built that it stood there under all that village on top, but it is covered with 800 inscriptions that most of them are acts of liberation of slaves. So that makes it a great document for human rights. Because it's times when even democratic Athens considered it correct to have slaves, to use the captives of the wars in the mines, in the fields, or the people that hadn't managed to pay debts, they were acting as slaves for the ones that were indebted for a while. So things like that. Because democracy had only done one step and there was a long way to go. Yet even in those days, there were some people that were freeing the slaves, and that is mentioned right there in many inscriptions on that wall. You see, this is the other naval piece. We have the symbol of the center of the world. It's this conical stone, which also symbolizes the navel of the world.
Zeus was the main Greek god, and he wanted to determine where is the center of the world, so he released 2 eagles on the eastern and western edges of the world, and they flew together here over Delphi. Ever since then, the Greeks considered Delphi to be the most central place, the most important, the most spiritual spot on the planet. Perhaps it's no coincidence that it's also one of the most beautiful locations in all of Greece, with this stunning view from the hillside looking down on the Temple of Apollo. This was the main temple on the site, and this is where the oracle resided.